Right.
If I could eat those, I would. Peanuts can't have gluten.
I missed the last meeting, which I'm really sad. I listened to about half of it.
Yeah. The first half or the last half?
So the first 30 minutes, I think, was like a recap, and you couldn't even hear the audio. And then like, there was another like,
the first 20.
but then I heard when everyone started kind of talking and starting with recommendations and ideas, and then I didn't get to finish it, but it seemed like
the
it
second half was mostly us just gossiping about you.
Yeah.
Right.
So I can kick us off in the interest of time, and we are expecting Aaron and Nancy will hopefully bring him in. So the mission for tonight, as you all may recall from the information that we sent, what Glenna was kind of teeing up, is you all are in the build group, subgroup. So you're looking at the physical changes we can make in the community in terms of our development pattern, that type of thing, what we allow where, whatever.
Zoning, right?
I don't want to limit anything.
Yeah.
But anything that has to do with kind of the way I characterize it, the built environment as it relates to affordability, what would you all characterize in terms of recommendations? So I wanted to put up the strategic vision because Glenna's idea was that the recommendations would start to reflect some of that. And so one of the things I want to say is I'm not here to engage with you all about zoning or about what makes sense where. What we want to do tonight is make sure that you have whatever recommendations you think may be appropriate recorded. And then we can talk about that with the larger group in October, November, December about the brass tacks. So tonight is really about opening up for you all to start thinking about what we should do from our built environments perspective to meet that vision. So,
Cool.
and what I'll do is I'll just record things as we go.
Okay.
Either ideas or recommendations or, major points that the whole group should consider. And then it'll all be characterized by us and Glenna, and then we'll get it back in advance of the next all group meeting, first part of October. So.
Okay.
Just if you all want to.
I mean,
Based on everything you've thought in third of the last 9 or 10 months, what are you thinking about?
I'll say this off the bat. I was honestly like really excited that this was the group that was put together. Throughout the course of this whole process, like I feel like, this crew is like people that I've really been able to engage with, and I'm excited to work with this crew.
Likewise.
Even Aaron.
You do
I'm
know
assuming
this is being recorded.
I know.
For the third time, this is being recorded.
Especially Aaron.
And it seemed like there were some others. They just couldn't make it today to this time.
Yeah, we're missing Diane
and Samantha.
Samantha.
Yeah.
I was like, I feel like.
So what
I
we'll
saw a
do,
lot more people on the invite.
so I think what we'll do is for those two who couldn't make it, if you all get done tonight, one and done, that's great, no pressure. If that's happening.
But we could share our recommendations or our minutes or just recording with them.
We'll get Nancy
can
to send
chime
it to them
in.
so they can add to it. So that they don't miss
And I
out.
mean, it's such a broad topic, and I was kind of curious of like where one group ends and another group begins. Like for me, trying to choose which group to be a part of, I felt like this one was kind of more of like kind of encompasses a lot of what the other groups might touch on.
The first group met last night, and there was a little bit of, overlap between what they were doing, and I think because they were preserved, and they started talking about funding, and so I don't think your guardrails are so narrow.
Yeah, but like, so for just on, because maybe it almost is easy, and I don't know exactly our process of how we want to attack or go through this, because I think we could have a really great discussion over 2 hours seems like a long time, but we could go for as long as we need to go. But, on preserve, I thought the access of a partner that's a community land trust, like an elevation. So let's just talk specific on ADUs, right? If I have a house, am I going to build an ADU that is going to allow a housing voucher, affordable tenant to live there? Or am I building it for my mother-in-law or my office or gym? And I think that, as evidenced by the quantity of ADUs built, which is closer to 0 than anything meaningful.
They're trickling in, but yeah.
But I'm, in what you see coming in, I feel like, and I don't want to speak for you and what you're seeing, I would think that a lot of those ADUs are not necessarily a new affordable housing unit for somebody in the city.
Correct.
Awesome. But from a preserve standpoint, in talking about ADUs,
Just started, Aaron.
you've missed all the good stuff. We've already been told like 3 times we're being recorded. But there's 2 concepts that are, I think, really important to me for an ADU that would make it into a tool that could be built more and used for types of things. One is a zoning that actually allows the ADU or lot to be sold. So a cottage house kind of zoning.
I'm going to turn this into a build.
Yeah, no, it is built. That is built.
Yeah, okay.
But the second that I was thinking about is actually specific to a community land trust, where if you had a community land trust that can go and buy units, but basically then actually build an ADU for a second unit, there's a way that you could almost use that, funding gap where, somebody's only able to pay X for that house. But in doing so, they're coming onto a property that they have a neighbor who lives in the backyard. And that whether it's the community land trust building it or a developer building it with the restriction, where a property is taken and purchased, it's put into a land trust, the front house is sold to a family that, gets the benefits through the land trust. But then another house is actually built and sold too, that's an ADU lot in the back. And whether you can't create the subdivision, which is obviously a big question on the cottage zoning of can you bifurcate it and sell it, that you could put potentially some restriction on the property that allows this ADU to be there, to be rented to somebody that fits this demographic or AMI profile, that allows you to almost get a twofer for the property and keep what would be potentially a naturally affordable unit affordable by putting it in the land trust, but by actually adding then the requirement or the need to rent or have that second unit be something that could be a benefit to the community and an income earner that would fit an AMI threshold.
Let me just.
There's 2 things there.
Yeah. So I'm thinking if I'm some retiree, and I've got this extra space in my backyard, but I don't have $300,000 to build a useful unit in my backyard. I can then maybe go to the city and
I think that could work too.
Trust with.
I think that could work too, where you say, you raise your hand of like, hey, I'd love to maybe create even another income stream for myself. I'm willing to. The big issue is, can that ADU be sold or not? And if you can create a zoning, which I think should be a recommendation of ours, that would allow for areas of the city to create a cottage house or a zoning that would allow these top lots to be sold, I think that's one piece. I think the second piece, because that first piece is going to be hit with all kinds of resistance.
Who's going to buy this? Who are we selling it to? Like, are we selling it to the person who, well, if it's a rental, who buys it?
So let's just talk about it from just a market rate, naturally affordable front house. If that house could be bought for, let's just say 400 grand today, it's an 800-foot house. I, as a developer, would be more or less forced to buy it, scrape it, and build a duplex that's stupid and not affordable anymore. But if I was allowed to build a duplex on the front and have 2 ADUs in the back, and I could sell all 4 of those units, then that 400 grand price is no longer prohibitive. I can come up with more of a model of how I build a 1,500 foot unit, a 1,500 foot unit, a 1,000 foot unit, and a 1,000 foot unit. So instead of building 5,000 feet of 2 stupid big duplexes, I'm building 4 units, and I could sell all 4 of them, or I could rent all 4 of them. That price of 400 grand for the land is no longer as prohibitive. And I think that there's a development play that, one, brings new supply online that are 1,000 foot houses that could then be sold because it's on a 25 by 62.5 foot lot for 300 grand. And I can make money doing it. There could be a side where you skew to the actual restriction and it's no longer market rate, in which case there could be a public-private partnership where me as a developer is no longer being paid for, build for X, sell for Y. I'm being paid of build for X, rent to this, and of X, I earn my 10% fee or whatever, right? And so I'm working for a different bucket of income. And that's how a lot of LIHTC and developers will develop. I mean, they're less for this being a good, long-standing real estate deal. They're more a fee developer. But I think that this concept of an ADU that could be sold, or an ADU if it can't be sold, which is the situation we live in today, and so you don't see as many ADUs built for an affordable purpose. But yes, if there was maybe a program that you helped people build an ADU in their backyard and spent the money, and from that, they're giving up a portion of their yard, but they're maybe earning an income stream in perpetuity that helps them stay in their house. I think that's great. Or if there's a intermediary, like an elevation, that would help purchase the property, but put a restriction on it or add an ADU to it that says, hey, you can come in and buy this front house and we'll give you the great loan. It's a 400 grand house, but you only have to pay 250. We'll bridge the other 150. But the string is we're also gonna put this 250 grand ADU in a portion of your yard that we need to rent to a group. You don't have to rent it. You don't have to manage it. We can help manage that process. But how do you create a process that could bring ADUs online that would be rented to the demographic that we're looking to help and provide additional units for a portion of that AMI stack?
I think it's great to be able to portion off and sell a piece of your property for that. And if that's something a homeowner wants to do, I think that's great. And then a developer can go in there and build something. My concern is building a bunch of rentals that are then owned by Cornerstone, and then
We're part of the problem.
yeah, then it just creates more of the same. If I keep thinking about this, 60-some-year-old widow or widower who's got this property, doesn't want to leave their house, but can find a way to create extra income. For them to be a landlord with their own property with help makes sense to me.
Or even be able to just sell it off completely.
Or sell it off completely.
But I feel like
if they sell it off completely, if we're selling it off to Cornerstone to make more rentals that are owned by a corporate conglomerate, then it's I don't think that's the healthiest.
But I think what you're saying is those are affordable units. They're not market units.
Well,
So it's a different demographic. It's trying to achieve the goal that we're trying to get after, which is create more affordable units. If there's a corporate entity that's doing that, are we meeting the same goal?
But I think a corporate
right now
entity,
we don't have that ability. I mean, somebody could come in and do the ADUs as market rates, but what I added here is enable ADUs to be sold if affordable. Is that where you're going at?
So I think that if you allowed a cottage house zoning, so there's 2 pieces. So one is corner lots, I know already allow some bifurcation and sale of the lot. Right now, today, most of these people living in these houses, your 65-year-old widower, isn't able to sell her ADU and doesn't have the money to build the ADU, but would maybe be willing to raise their hand and say, hey, I would put an ADU here and I'm willing to rent it to a specific threshold, if affordable. And how do you find those people that like, hey, could we go find 100 houses like that would allow some group to build 100 ADUs to be rented affordably? And would that widower then share in a piece of that income that allows them to stay in their property and has the assistance from that group to be a landlord? I think that that's something that could work today because there doesn't need to be any zoning change for that. A lot of these lots allow for ADUs, just nobody's necessarily building them for the purpose we're talking about. But how could you create a bucket or pool of money that could bring these online? And I mean, my thought came back full circle to how does that fit into potentially some form of a land trust?
Yeah.
That the land trust is difficult, at least in my opinion, with the way that Habitat for Humanity or a lot of them are looked at, where it's great to keep one house here that's naturally affordable for perpetuity, but if you could get two for it, you could make those numbers maybe work better to spread that program out, even if one is where someone's living and owning and the other one is a rental that's kind of run by a land trust or a group. I don't know exactly.
The barrier there seems to be the ability to have two separate improvements on a separate piece of land, right? What is, Brad, what needs to be overcome to accomplish that?
Well, we'd have to amend the code to allow that kind of customization on lots, differentiating between owners and renters.
Mm-hmm.
And we could do that. The question is how far?
To have essentially three tax parcels on one residential lot. Right?
Yeah, you have to subdivide it, and we'd have to obviously amend the code to really decrease the
So
lots.
I think one piece and a recommendation for us should be to allow that, because I think if there are these smaller lots, people can build more density on one lot today that allows one house. And I think people would do that and be able to sell them. I think that's
if they're affordable. So one of the things that we need to be mindful of here is we need to create, and I'm not trying to steer you guys. I know I said that at the beginning, but I'm not.
No, but I think
I'm violating my own rule.
I think
because if we
do
just do
it.
that, and if it's still just market rate units, they're smaller and they're more expensive, we haven't achieved our goal. So we need to insert somehow in what you're talking about, Aaron, that the purpose of doing that is to ensure
actual land trust that owns and controls the land. Maybe there's a shared equity model where the land tenants, the owners of the improvements, actually can share in some of that equity or whatever that looks like. But ultimately, the land is owned by a nonprofit, not the city. A nonprofit or a community group, like an actual community land trust that can therefore dictate the use of the buildings on that land, such as affordability.
And that helps us from a regulatory standpoint, because if just Joe Schmo comes in and wants to do it and make a ton of money on their house, we're not going to do it because we can write in the fact that we need to have these thresholds.
That's in the land lease.
Affordable. I think that makes sense to me to an extent. I also think that if there was just these tiny lots where all you could build is 1,000 feet, sure, I understand you could go build 1,000 feet to the nines and go try to get 600 grand for it. But I also think that those size of units coming online, which nobody's building right now, that even if it is market rate, it will bring down the average home price and bring what I would say are more closer to naturally affordable. I mean, I think that there's units needed between 30 and 120%, and I think some could be restricted in a way that hits certain thresholds, and I understand checks bogeys that are needed for the city and adhering to certain guidelines. But I think just allowing 4 units to be built on one, you only would allow such size structures on these smaller lots that pushes it to a more naturally affordable level as is without the restriction. So in my opinion, it works well both ways. You could have lots that you truly restrict and need to be done a certain way, and maybe they can be financed or put together so they're more viable with a land trust or a community group. But if you allowed that zoning for, let's just say me, not an affordable developer, to take one lot, and instead of doing what I said, which would be like what normally a developer would do now, scrape shitty old house, build big expensive house, that it's a model that is maybe 2 duplexes that are smaller and 2 cottage houses that are smaller, that just by their square footage and layout, that I could still achieve my goals as a market rate developer while achieving the city's goals of bringing new supply online of units that just don't exist today.
What would incentivize a developer to do that versus the former, versus just putting up their duplex?
I think that, for example, I have zero desire to go build market rate high-end duplexes. I have a desire to
But others
build
do.
units that would be more naturally affordable. I think that you could drive down in that type of model. I mean, you could go tear down a place, and if it's 50 feet right now, you could go build a duplex. So people are doing that. I think that there's an issue of just still the price per land per unit that forces that duplex to be a bigger project, right? Like I can't go spend 400 grand or 500 grand for a lot and build one 1,000 foot house or 2 1,500 foot duplexes. I'm forced to build a bigger project. And if I had an ability of building 4 units or 3 units, I think it creates an opportunity where on those top lots, I can't build a big building. I can't build a 2,500 foot unit. I can only build what would fit in the confines of what that parameter would be for that cottage house or ADU that sits behind this front house. So yeah, anyone could go buy a lot and build a normal duplex. But if you're allowing the cottage units to be sold, well, maybe that the max density on a one lot is 5,000 feet. So I could have a 1,500 foot duplex, a 1,500 foot duplex, 1,000 foot ADU, and 1,000 foot ADU, and I'm maxed out at a threshold where if I can get 4 units for a land price of 400 grand, that I'm in at 100 grand a unit, it at the beginning is much more viable to bring that unit online than if, you know, I'm at 400 grand and I can only build 2 units and I'm at 200 grand, which is kind of the market today.
Are there limits for square footage for a home based on lot size?
Yes. It gets into it based on bulk plan and stuff, but so yes.
There are, yes.
And would that be spread out amongst multiple units? So like if you can only have 8,000
The
square
only thing
feet.
that's in now is a main structure and an ADU and the
Right.
portion therefore.
So I think what you're saying, Aaron, and I think it's a valid point, which is if we just write that into the code, absent anything about this is the type of entity that could do it, so that gets to either the land trust or a nonprofit, or these extra units are for X amount of affordability. If that's not in there, you may be the developer who's interested in doing that, but there might be 5 others out there that are just saying, I'm still doing it.
I'm taking advantage of the code and what it is, but
No. They'll still say, I'm doing the duplex. I'm doing the market rate duplex, and I'm charging $1.5 million aside, and we've lost that, at least that lot as an opportunity. So I think what you were saying is we need some type of hook to create.
I don't think there's an elegant market-based solution to make that happen, right? It is, on these small lots, it's extracting as much value as possible. As well-intentioned as you are,
Sure.
who are you competing against?
No, I understand.
There's a lot of scrapers out there.
No, I mean, it's consistent and across the whole metro area.
So let's broaden it out. Amber, do you have any ideas?
The
Because
only
what I
thing
want to do
wonder-
here
I
is
love,
take the conversation and maybe try to drill toward a recommendation.
I love the idea of having some ADUs, but I do think we need to have a limit, because if we have every single corner lot is like chopped up in Inglewood, A, I know people who, a lot of them aren't gonna like it, and B, we are gonna lose some things. Like, I live on a corner lot, and it is beautiful, like, it's amazing, but I could see, like, if we lost every single corner lot, I mean, that would be concerning. So I do think we do need to have them, but I don't know, what if every single lot is chopped up? That's what I'm worried about, you know?
Right, and I've been in a lot of public hearings on the Code Next Task Force
Yeah,
where
and
they
they
got
are-
a lot of heat, you
Yeah,
know?
and so,
people
like,
don't
I
want-
feel like
so
it is
you gotta always
important
think
to
about
bring
what's
that
practical.
up.
This is gonna
Yeah.
go to a vote when it, to make these kinds of changes.
Like, is there a way to say like a certain percentage or a certain amount in a neighborhood, in a community, so that way it's not like 100% every single corner is, you know?
No, I like it for mid-block too, in some instances, that expands what could be done, so it's not people just targeting necessarily
Yeah.
corner lots.
Too, so it's not every
I know the
lot.
way it was written, or at least when I read the code next on it, where only a certain amount per block or a certain amount over a period of time. I think that I'm just as a counterpoint to what you're saying, and I hear you, and I live on a corner lot too, like it's great, but if our city and our state continues to grow and advance, and again, maybe this is not for today, but for tomorrow, let's just say we double in population, right? And as Denver and Colorado could double in population over a period of time. I know you don't necessarily want us to turn into like California, where there is 2 to 4 houses on every lot in a lot of instances. I think the market dictates who stays in their lot, who sells their lot, who's developing what. But I think that having the ability to do it brings the supply that's needed for the city, state to double, and brings developers to the table to build these units. And again, I think a part of this is 100% makes sense to be restricted in some way if affordable. But I think that providing a developer the opportunity to build smaller houses will ultimately bring smaller houses that provides more units for all the AMIs to the market. And I think that who develops them and who builds them, land trust or nonprofit could be a part, but you know, if I'm a market rate developer and I want to build affordable housing, don't limit me because I'm not a nonprofit.
Well, I think as a fee developer, I mean, you don't need to own the land.
Yeah.
Land trust could own the land. This typology, if allowed, but it's gotta be on a protected lot that's owned by a land trust or, whatever that.
Because so far what's happening is not working.
Well,
So I feel like.
there's not a lot of this stuff being built on these corner lots or things anyway yet. I'm curious what those first couple coming through are looking like.
What about in other
There's some
cities
old
who are
ones in my
doing
neighborhood
it?
that have been there.
Did we never got like that kind of in-depth research on cities that are already doing this and like how many of their units are actually affordable now versus how many are like not? Like we're never got that detailed.
I think just,
Got more than
I think
one.
the anecdotal evidence from around the country is just allowing ADUs as a use is really not closing the gap.
Okay,
You
that's
have to
what I
be
was
more aggressive
wondering
about
what
it.
the
You have to
research
define
says.
it as,
Which, before you walked in, we were talking about like how many people are actually building an ADU for the use that we want.
Mhm.
And the answer is closer to 0 than anything meaningful. So how do you incentivize that ADU build? And whether it's helping the widow build one or allowing a land trust to take a property and build an ADU, or allowing the bifurcation where the ADU could then be sold, I think are all steps that make sense and would provide. Like, I don't know if there's a single recommendation here. In my eyes, there's multiple recommendations here that tie together what you're talking about, tie together what you're talking about, specific to.
well, let's shift to that then. Well, let's shift it in starting at least for this segment. What could a recommendation or 2 or 3 or more start to look like?
I think allowing cottage zoning on a portion of lots in the city.
And by that, you mean 2 distinct structures able to be sold on one existing lot or more, 2 or more.
And splitting the lot, right?
Yeah, I'd say 3 distinct structures where a lot of them have a naturally affordable house, and to have, let's just, maybe not 3 is the right word, to allow more between 2 and 4, where I think the home run on a new construction for this model, where you take a house that's falling down, right? Sure, it's naturally affordable, but it was built 70 years ago, it should be torn down, it can't be fixed any longer. So you tear it down. What would be the best thing to be built on that one lot to meet our goals? And in my opinion, it's 4 distinct units that could be a duplex and a cottage house and a cottage house. And again, I agree with you, it shouldn't be every house on every lot. But if you allow that for certain areas of the city, you're gonna start seeing that supply come online that I think is impactful. And I think if you put guardrails around it that are too strong, I don't think you're gonna see a lot happen.
I think though, if we don't have those guardrails, if this goes to vote, they're not gonna vote for it.
Yeah, you gotta be.
Like, we have to.
Sure, the
be-
context.
Yeah, like, there has to be some meat in the middle, like.
And the
otherwise
meeting in the
it'll-
middle is to say, for the areas of the community that we want to allow that to happen, it has to meet affordability thresholds, period.
Again, I think that works to an extent, but I think that by doing that, you are gonna limit the amount of development and the amount of these that you'll see in the near term. And that a dual approach that has a portion that needs to maybe be affordable and a portion that can maybe be market rate, I still think is impactful and brings supply online that otherwise, again, we've learned that there's obviously a great need at, 30 to 60% AMI.
Right.
But there's also a pretty big need at 80 to 120. And I guess that if affordable could be a very wide definition, right? Because you could say that affordable is, it could be 80 or I guess the 80 is the.
Well, I mean, again, going back to this land trust model where you have an entity that owns the land in perpetuity, and there's not just covenants, but in the land leases. So every structure that's on that land has to fall within this. You say the majority of these structures. So if there's 4, majority would have to be 3. That meet an affordability requirement. So you're carving in some ability for some market rate. Maybe that is appealing or provides the margin there, but we've got to have something there. And I think to simplify it, rather than try to make this
Yeah,
sort
what
of
you
Rube
guys don't
Goldberg
have to
machine
do,
that works for everybody.
You don't have to write the code.
Yeah.
This is broad strokes.
Sure.
And the idea is to have the group start to get into the muscle of it.
I'll step back and say that as a good first step, that if affordable is fine to me. Because I think it is a good, meaningful step that could allow for units to come online that check a box.
And some of the discussion, even with adding ATUs to the R1 zones, even with affordability, there was a ton of pushback.
For the land trusts, how would those be set up? Are we, say we're talking about land trusts on private property for ADUs. Are these donated by the owner of the property? Are these purchased by the city?
There's a number of different ways, but no, you do not want the city owning these units. In fact, I don't think the city can own housing. It's a nonprofit organization. Let's just even say it's Elevation Community Land Trust. Let's even say it's ECLT. They come in and let's say somebody's sitting there in a single family home on a lot. They can buy that land underneath it, pay that homeowner for that land. That homeowner then needs to lease their space on that land back.
Right.
And then the land trust can further develop more housing on that land. So put an ADU, put 2 ADUs, tear the house down, put up a duplex, whatever it is. But they control the land. It's a nonprofit that has a board, that has community members, that even the owners and the lessees of the land have membership on that board. That's the sort of a pure model of the land trust. And so city's not involved in that. The city could provide seed funding.
But does Denver not do land trusts? Did we not?
No, we allow, Elevation
allow it,
does.
but they don't own the.
No, because
Okay.
Denver Housing Authority exists to own housing, but they don't do home ownership.
Okay.
The land trust model is that really middle ground of helping people get into ownership. That's not full ownership, they're just owning the structure. It's a shared equity. Anyway, it's that stepping stone from renting to owning.
So if there was a nonprofit, we've already encountered or been taught about a few of these, a nonprofit comes in, maybe they canvass the neighborhood, like, hey, we will purchase your land. For a land trust, you can stay on your land. This is the plan, blah, 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 blah. And if they have enough funding, they can go out and buy 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lots. And then from there, they partner with a builder who then takes that land trust, builds ADUs.
Yep, for a fee, for a
For a
profit.
fee, of course, they get a profit, but they're not paying for the land, they're just paying for the construction of the.
Yep.
They're just bringing the supply online.
Yeah. And then those are then sold.
So a couple of things, they could either continue to be owned by the land trust and rented to people who are renting, or sold to individuals that are income qualified. It's really flexible model.
So hold that thought.
Okay.
Because I think there's another recommendation buried in that, specifically around those types of entities. But for now, respecting where you're coming from, allow additional small lot development capacity, irrespective of the zoning. I mean, we can figure that out. Allow sales on lots, so they're not just owner occupied for one, the others are rental. And then, but those are all tied to an affordability requirement. So the example would be, if a lot has the capacity for 4 units, 3 would be affordable.
Do we think 3 is good?
That's just an example. I mean, that's not.
Yeah, I feel like if you're skewing on the affordable, like whether it's 3 or 4 is less important to me. I think it could all be affordable. I think that, I brought the example of like, it'd be great to allow 2 test cases of this, one that you restrict and one you don't restrict, but you build the same projects and see what the market says and does for it. Yeah.
I do think it's important because if you don't limit and you keep having all these little, even if it's a tiny pot of just low income, it does become problematic because neighbors feel sometimes certain ways about low income families. And I don't know, I do think like the number that are affordable are important personally.
Would you say it's better to have 2 affordable?
I don't know, I just think that
market rate?
whatever we like recommend, I just think there should be something to make sure we're not creating mini projects, if you know what I mean,
so-
like projects.
Why don't we back out of the 3 or 4 and let the whole group chew on it when the time comes? So I could say X number need to be Y for it.
Yeah, that'll work.
But Hugo, I do agree. I do think, I don't think perfect being the enemy of good in the situation. I do think more build is like important.
Yeah.
At market rate. And I think
density.
like that will, over the course, like if every municipality in the country took that same approach, it would relieve a lot of this stress. Making housing that is purposefully affordable is important. But I also think it's important to allow more building.
Period. Exactly. I guess that's it, where if you allow people to build smaller houses because you allow the zoning for it, you're creating more houses that will be just generally naturally affordable and affect the supply-demand issue. That's really been a big part of the issue of why prices are so high. There's no supply of small houses.
And we know that
And-
ADU is not the answer to everything.
No, and
But
when we
it's-
say ADU, like I think a cottage house maybe looks a little different than, what I guess they could be interchangeable. But I like the aspect of the land trust or the nonprofit partner who could come and acquire properties with the intent that they're getting a 2-fer or a 3-fer versus just one unit that, sure, it's great to keep that unit and keep it naturally affordable, but to allow there to be more units, even if, again, it happens on 100 lots, boom, like there's 100 affordable houses and 100 affordable ADUs that didn't exist before, that goes a big way. Like even if that you had 100 units for, innovative housing concepts, I mean, that bridges a huge gap for them of supply that just doesn't exist in the market.
So I added a second recommendation based on that, which is, we can literally say, allow more building, period. Increase in supply across the board, more units equals less price pressure.
Yes,
We wanna-
and ways that we could do that. And I do think that there could be guardrails around it, but I think that the second we start, and I understand that guardrails are needed to get a vote through, but I think that there's a lot of conversation about those types of guardrails so that we're not kicking ourselves right when we start with something that is a challenge for people to build or get out of the ground.
Are we good with those two? So what I thought would be interesting, just to throw out to you all, is Aaron, you talked about the model in terms of the land trust, nonprofits. Is there any recommendation based on that conversation that could emerge that we want to capture around that relates to the built character? I'll let you think about it, but there was a lot of talk around that as part of the model, and do we want to capture that somehow as a recommendation?
It doesn't seem possible without it, honestly.
We want to build relationships with nonprofits, right? We want these nonprofits to feel that Inglewood is there to work with them and play ball. Are there ways to have funding funnel from the city to these nonprofits that would empower them? Like, obviously, we don't want the city to own any of the property.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that the city
No,
can't
that's
help.
right. I mean, absolutely. And subsidy. It's about subsidizing an organization to do this. You know, it takes money. So dedicated funding from the city to support this work. I think streamlining permitting, the zoning changes that we've already talked about. If there's any help or opportunity to leverage resources with the housing authority for like the income qualification and administration of the affordability requirements.
I think a big piece of it ties into how that developer can access funds from the city, who could access funds from Prop 123, and how a program is created that utilizes funds and resources that could be available for a city to help spur this versus, you know, hindering the city's budget with money that they probably don't have for something like this. So like, how do you tie that together with the right development partner?
We've had one unsuccessful experience with Prop 123, which 9 out of 10 other cities that have done it so far have had the equal experience. But I think the idea of teaming up, the city partnering with a partner to leverage, that's probably going to get more eyeballs on future applications than just the city coming in.
$10 million land banking deal from Prop 123 to buy 20 to 25 homes that go into this land trust.
And that those 20 to 25 homes can turn into 50 to 75 units long-term. And with success, it's a program that could be expanded upon with, if not Prop 123 money, you know, land trust money or other groups that could do a similar type of thing. I think that for our build group, that there's really, I mean, at least in my opinion, two sides. One is us kind of talking about what we're talking about now, 1 to 4 unit type of projects on residential lots. And the other piece is building bigger buildings and bigger units and how and what types of recommendations we can make that can allow that. And I know we had this whole thing that was on incentives versus requirements for developers to bring that supply online. And, you know, I think they're presenting today. Is it tonight?
Was it last
Right
night?
now? It was last night?
That was last night.
The
The Hobby Lobby.
Kimco folks, I met with
Oh,
them.
they had their community meeting last night.
Yeah,
Last night.
but you know, how do you incentivize, you know, Kimco's not an affordable developer.
I'll give you.
Not a housing developer at all. They don't
Correct.
shopping centers.
Yes.
Is there movement with Hobby Lobby?
Yes, they're in for a planned unit development to develop apartments with the possible second phase as a hotel. But anywhere between 200 and 400 apartments
A
is their
hotel?
plan.
Oh,
The-
wow.
And
Wow.
the hotel he talks about.
I don't think
as-
it's good.
as
That's just
Well,
potentially-
that's interesting, I've
Well,
never.
the hotel he talks about is potentially another multifamily project.
It could be one or both.
And in my conversations,
But we
it's
don't
like,
know. They can do whatever they want, right?
As a fit, no,
No, or like they
they're,
can't.
they're coming in for a custom kind of zoning from us. So that's why they're going through this public process.
How many years out is this?
Oh,
2, 3, 4?
they need to find a housing developer. What they're doing is they're getting the.
they're trying to get through
entitlements
this process to then go find a partner
Right.
to be the developer.
Okay.
But in my conversations with them, I said, I think you'd have a lot more support for a market rate building, which is what they would want to build. If you took a chunk of your land and sold it or developed it, maybe not as a hotel, but as a affordable or a different type of project that could check boxes that we're looking to have on bringing more affordable supply.
They're hearing that from everybody. They've heard that from we as staff, they're hearing that from the DDA, and they'll definitely hear it from council. So.
Right.
Sooner rather than later, they need to address it, so.
I think we're about to learn some lessons from Denver doing a sales tax to support affordable housing. I mean, in that first line up there of dedicated funding, might be worth mentioning.
What have they learned, do you think?
Well, it's about to go to the ballot in November. Sales tax.
Do we know any polling on that? Does it seem like it's,
I mean, they're optimistic.
okay.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of things at play with that. There's a Denver health.
So we started off this segment talking about the build aspect of the entity that would be doing.
Yeah.
And so we talked about dedicating funding to sales tax to incentivize land trusts and other nonprofits to build permanent affordable housing and to seek partners for 123. Is there a recommendation here on the build side for how?
I mean, to me,
Who
it's
is,
make it
who is
as,
standing up these units?
yeah, it's make it as easy as possible for a nonprofit partner to deliver affordable units. So that includes permitting, funding,
Fee, time.
yeah, anything that, I also mentioned, maybe this is a much smaller piece, but, housing authority resources to help with administration.
So does that look like different fees for nonprofit versus private builds? Is that?
Usually it's just speed of approval. I mean, Denver has an AHART program that is a fast track for affordable housing, so they try to promise a faster timeline from the concept review through.
Is there a slowdown in Eaglewood? I figure like it's like such a, like my experience as a business owner here has always been that, and I'm learning it more now having a business in Denver, is that things move faster here. for
So
us.
I can address that. I think a lot of people say fast tracking and that type of thing. The one thing that, the longest process that we have is a planned unit development. And those are usually around 10 months or so if everything goes flying. And that's just because the code requires the built-in timeline for P&Z to look at it, for council to look at it, a community meeting that happened last night. Everything else that we do, we are so much, I mean, I wouldn't even compare us to.
No, I wouldn't either.
But even say like to Littleton and the Sheridan's pretty rapid too, but we don't have months and months and months when we're sitting on applications. It's just, we're not built that way. Our codes aren't that complicated. And it just, so I will pledge as the Director of Community Development, if there's a recommendation that council wants out of this, that we take a look at those things, and are there things that we could do even more rapidly? We'll do that, but I don't think it's a huge competitive advantage that we don't already have.
Got it. Yeah, I agree.
So again, I like how you guys are boiling it, make it as easy as possible for affordable housing developers. I didn't just say limited to that. Affordable housing developers to build and deliver units. And that's all encompassing that the big group can take on about that fast tracking, about fee waivers or whatever it may be.
Because how much revenue is the city getting from these fees? Like, how important is it?
From building fees in
Yeah.
general, it's pretty significant, and it's been very significant the last 5 years based on the amount of building that we've had. I'd say this year, I think it's around $2.5 million.
But is it,
Bear in mind that our general fund is 70, so that's not insignificant.
but is it, how detrimental to new builds are these fees?
They're built into every developer's performance. I mean, it's expected and it's.
I don't think
It's not
that
forbidden.
I don't think that those fees are what's detrimental to a developer. It's the ultimate rents that you get for these units versus a market rate unit, and making the numbers work to still have a viable project when you have to bring a certain number of units online.
Which ultimately speaking to risk, is there anything the city can do to help mitigate risk of development? I mean, that's what.
Yeah.
Sure.
Is that a city issue or is that a state issue?
Well, I mean, like I said, whatever the city, are there things the city can do to help mitigate the risk of that process, or share in some, or, you know, backstop loans, or, I don't know.
I'm guessing that the fund group, very first recommendation would be the fee waiver for affordability, just if it's either zero or it's close to it. That's, that is a financial hit for the city, but it's also, if it's that much of an incentive, it's balance that.
I remember at some point somebody mentioned that the land we're sitting on now could be used for something other than what it currently is.
Oh, yeah.
Is that something that our group should be talking about, or no, is that a different?
Well, I guess what I would say about City Center
I mean, I didn't know there was a third floor. I feel like this is such
Yeah.
a massive building.
Yeah, so this site is probably one of the more complicated pieces of real estate in the community. In that the city, when this was built 22 years ago, 24 years ago, in 2000, we had a developer come in and build it. The city technically still owns the land, but we gave them a 75-year ground lease, and that has 51 years left. That developer walked away in 2018 from a $20 million debt service payment. So this has been in receiving hands for the last 6 years. So my redevelopment manager, Dan, and I have been working ever since then to try to bust this through to figure out a way to reposition this entire area. Because those two apartments are going to stay there, but the rest of City Center, from our perspective as staff, should be on the table. Because we're right next to a regional rail line.
Well, Walmart's staying too.
And Walmart's staying too because they
Oh,
own their land.
no.
They own their
Why?
land.
No.
Is the
That's
bank
literally
on
the
note?
worst Walmart in the state of Colorado.
It might be.
So right now, the way it works right now is there's a special service around of Miami called LNR. They're working with Bank of America on behalf of a couple maybe bondholders that are standing behind it. And we've been working with LNR for a long time to try to reposition this as a redevelopment scenario. We actually had a developer that we selected through a competitive process 3 or 4 years ago out of Portland. We worked with them, tried to get them across the finish line. We actually had a pre-development agreement on LNR's desk in Miami. They chose never to execute it. So that group.
Developer did, or LNR?
LNR never executed. The developer was ready to go. We were ready to do it. LNR, for whatever reason, chose not to engage with that group.
How, like, do y'all know, like, how many apartments or condos, I don't even know.
That's about
Like, how many could you?
Oh, I'll get to that. So
I'm like-
Yeah, I mean, I've been
Like-
involved, Rod's obviously.
the developer that we had in mind from Portland, they had an entire building that they were going to build as an affordable. So overall, they proposed, depending on this, I'm getting way too far in the weeds. If this building stays, it was a number. If this building goes, it was a slightly higher number. But they were in anywhere from 12 to 1,500 apartment units on City Center additionally. And they were going to
I feel
build,
like that would make such a huge.
they were going to build over in this corner, and essentially an AMI kind of apartment that would have been about 120 units.
And they were
So
also.
about 10% of what they were going to build, they were going to dedicate to affordable.
Which is nice, because.
But now we're back at square one. And God knows what's going to happen. We don't know yet. Eleanor has a buyer in mind, but we don't know if that buyer has immediate redevelopment on their mind.
Brett, this might be unknowable, or maybe it's super knowable. When we talk about like the fees and everything and that big chunk that the city gets from these developer fees and whatnot. When we talk about the tax implications of a new citizen in Inglewood, do we know what an annual value of a citizen is? Does that make sense? Like, if you increase density in Inglewood per person, how much tax revenue does that person give? So if we are saying, okay, we will waive these fees for this build because we're going to get X amount of new citizens in this municipality, and we can expect this much tax revenue from this per person. Or are people a negative tax-wise? Like,
I don't think there's gonna be any pushback on fee waivers for affordable housing. I mean, there's not gonna be any resistance. There's not a case, there's not a big case to be made there.
I agree. And again, I'm not trying to shade their outcome here, but I do think that's something that the city council could probably say, you know, that we can afford that.
Yeah.
We could try to make it up in different. So I will say in terms of our fees, they're really not from planning the projects, it's from building the projects. Our planning fees are pretty reasonable in terms of the amount of money they bring in, just because there's not a lot. But once you start talking about building toward a, like Swedish building a $75 million expansion, those fees are going to be a couple million.
sure.
On the building side, on the planning side. So.
But let's say a developer comes in and they build a place with 400 new units, and you have 400 more people, or, let's say 600 more people in those 400 units. Those 600 people are then theoretically shopping, spending their money.
What's the sales tax implication? What's the whole trickle down of whether it's a renter or an owner? The 400 new units, that building is gonna have property taxes that is probably a couple $100,000 a year of ongoing property taxes. So there's value to that for the city. And I do think it's
a lot to the schools in the county.
Yeah.
On the property tax.
And I do think that there's a trickle down effect of people spending money where they live.
Right.
So I think density in that aspect is good for business, and you'd rather be in a community that is larger than smaller, and you have more.
I mean,
The biggest complaint to that is traffic and parking.
Right, yes, exactly.
Well,
but there's plenty of people in Inglewood who don't want a single other person.
Oh, totally. And I think that that's a challenge, and we are going to have that challenge no matter what. And so it's how do you have the meeting of the minds that can overcome it, while knowing that, like, hey, yeah, I understand, like, you really like your corner lot and you don't want, the density there, but this is maybe the right spot for it to provide affordability and allow an in for more families to the neighborhood.
I will tell you this, I think I wrote this recommendation down at one point in these meetings, but how willing is the city to really commit to this is our vision for the city, that we want affordability, we want density, and like educate people and have a campaign about it. And like, this is the kind of city that we want, and this is what it can look like. And there will be opposition, but are there resources put into it to educate that opposition?
What do others think about that as a recommendation around some type of public education process?
And I think they're kind of are starting something smaller, because I know they emailed me all these questions about being a renter and affordability. They want to make videos, so I think they're somebody's moving in that direction. I don't know who it is.
Sure.
I have no idea, but I got the email and responded, so I think we should educate.
I mean, I see it as a real opportunity to like add to the distinctiveness of Inglewood and the character of Inglewood.
We can be
to
different.
lean into it and like, you
Totally.
know, that's what people love about it. It's
Mhm.
working class, it's smaller homes, it's
Yeah, that's why
like,
we're
let's
here.
brand it, you know, let's, you know, thinking very ideologically there,
But
but
that's why I worked like 3 or 4 jobs for 4 years to keep my family here.
Yeah.
I never saw them because I wanted them here in England. I easily could have moved out to Brighton
oh
or
God, yeah.
Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
But I chose to stay here, and lots of families do, but lots of families also didn't.
Yeah, I think Inglewood sits in such a great spot from a real estate perspective that, you know, Littleton is further south, right? We are Denver adjacent, where you can get anywhere in our city here relatively,
Santa Fe.
depending on
light
the,
rail.
depending on the
It's
time of day,
285.
depending on the
Get to
time of
the
day
mountains
maybe,
quickly,
but you
know?
can get everywhere quickly here. And in my opinion, I mean, this is a place in the city, in our metropolitan area, that should have more density and allow more people to be here that, you know, are ultimately priced out maybe of Denver, and, you know, want to live in an infill place. So I like the leaning into that.
Let's pick a way that we can define that, rather than turning into Black Park, or, you know, where these scrapes are happening and, you know.
And I'll just say that, and not to like delve back to the previous recommendations and points, that, you know, limiting it to just being like, oh, we're allowed density if it's affordable, is maybe not exactly what you want. Like, okay, everybody who has a voucher or is below a certain AMI like flocks to Englewood because we're building all these affordable units, and then all the other units, because they're not affordable, are just the same market rate stuff, right? Like you create like an even bigger gap there potentially that I feel like can be filled by market rate, smaller product. And so I don't exactly know where I'm going with that comment, but it's,
Are you saying we need both, like the?
you need it all. It needs
Some
all.
of them will
Some
be
more
really controlled,
affordable, some-
market rate.
I
Is
mean,
that
I
what
think
you're saying?
affordability is a key piece of the character of Inglewood that people really value.
Well, and what is
And really
the
see as a
affordability?
differentiator.
Could we
between some other
change the zoning
city close
in a way, I'm not, this will obviously get pushed back from all kinds of sides, but where you're like, where you can't build a 5,000 foot spec, you know, like where you limit the building size to require people to build units that would be smaller and more naturally affordable, that leans into the density that you're talking about. Like you can't take down an existing house and just build one. You have to build 2 to 4.
But what if
and-
I wanted to build a bigger house on my lot for my family, since I have multiple generations living in my house? And I don't want my kids to have to
Again, I
share
think
a
there'd be
bedroom
all kinds of
forever.
pushback, but how do you limit
And how do you tell them
affordable
what they can
supply
do?
being scraped for 5,000 foot homes?
I mean, you could do a single family home, a ban on new single family home builds, right?
Yeah, 'cause
like-
that's crazy. We're not gonna get families here, and you can't tell
Well-
somebody what they can do on their own.
Well, I'm saying like, there's no new areas in Inglewood where you'd be able
We're
to,
building big.
build a new single family home. Like if you had like,
They're happening.
are there?
Yeah. In the
A few.
north and central part of the city, we have a common, now duplexes are far more popular than single-family houses. But there have been some people that have bought a lot, scraped the house and built a single.
Well, yeah,
There's not hundreds of them.
like if you were to take a spot that was already zoned. But I'm saying like, there's no greenfield builds, right? There's no like new lots being subdivided for single family homes. There's no room, right? Not like out in Brighton where there's whole
Land.
new.
There's no
land.
We have no vacant land that's built.
Right, that's what you're saying. Anything needs to be torn down to build something new
Right.
on the existing land.
So.
You gotta work within the confines of the land that we have. And I mean, I just hear, I'm forgetting the gentleman's name, but him talking about how Englewood already has the smallest amount of land and highest density per capita. And in some aspect, how do you lean into it further? And I hear you, like, it would be great to tear down your house and build a bigger house, but how do you limit that to be what's being built, or these big duplexes being built in favor of more denser supply? Or how do you provide the opportunity?
I was gonna say, I'll confess right now, I live in Boulder, and Boulder down some, shocking. Don't tell council. But anyway, Boulder did this. They limited house sizes. It's done nothing for affordability.
Yeah, I
Nothing,
mean, that's.
zero.
It's also wild.
Boulder.
It is an anomaly. It's kind of the Aspen of the Front Range in terms of what they can get, and it is a little bit market unrealistic. But they did try to limit the development density on some of these large behemoth sites, especially in the central and western part of the city.
And I mean, if it's their land, it's their land. If they bought it, I mean, we shouldn't be dictating, oh, you can't build your family a new home. Amazing what houses are sold.
Well, we are
need to be
limited.
torn down.
I mean, that's the thing. That's what zoning is. I mean, that's what code is there are
But we
some.
want to tell families now that, hey, if you, in your lot, if you buy this house, you scrape it, you can't rebuild your single family house. You now have to have your lot divided into two. Now you don't get a yard. Now you don't like it. Like, that just seems bizarre to me.
Well, I
I
think
don't
the
think it's a
distinction
winning
again could be
argument.
drawn that is, if you
Like,
want to do this
who's
higher
gonna-
density,
who's
you're
gonna-
doing it for affordability.
Yeah.
So you still have your choice. But if somebody else wanted to make a different choice and add that density, then an X amount has.
But I
to be-
thought what he was saying is that we wouldn't allow people to build a new home, just a
Well, these
single
are all
home.
just
No, you'll,
options.
yeah, we're spitballing, and I liked the concept that you had of how do we lean into a denser community? How do you keep, I don't think it's,
So I'll suggest two things. Let's not debate the lot size tonight, because allow additional small lot development capacity. That captures it. The big group, when you guys get together in the next few months, if you want to go there as a group, you certainly can. Take that up. But then getting back to Aaron's point, which was develop a community education campaign that higher density development for affordable housing can work and fit within Inglewood's history and character.
The thing is that there's such a huge contingent that wants 1955 Inglewood. That's not coming back. So how do we go forward with something that has some characteristics of that and some charm of that?
sure,
But it's going to be different.
100%.
So let's talk about moving to that, not trying to go back to something that's impossible.
Invest in a small
Thank
budget
you.
film
That's the.
about a woman who sells the back lot of her property to build an ADU, and she falls in love with the person who
Oh
moves
my
in there.
gosh.
It becomes a major hit, and then every person in Inglewood, every single person in Inglewood then builds an ADU hoping to fall in love.
Inglewood is for lovers. That's it, right there. Come on.
Because your campaign slogan.
It just doesn't turn out to be a serial killer.
Don't write that movie.
That's all I want.
There's another word there, Brad, that yes, I like that.
So Mutiny is opening up next door to Fellow Traveler, and we've gotten a lot of press about it, and I've talked to a lot of media in the area. And there's a big idea that Inglewood is becoming the new Denver, right, from a business perspective. And
Wasn't that the title of the West
Yeah.
Word story?
And they talk a lot about how forces are pushing businesses from Denver to Inglewood, and to the city's benefit, they talk a lot about how business friendly the city has been, and I agree 100%. And my hopes for downtown Inglewood are pretty big. Granted, I've got a personal stake in it. But one thing I said to one of the reporters is, we can fill every unit in downtown Inglewood with an amazing bar, restaurant, or retail space. But until we increase the density of the area, they won't last. They won't last. We are struggling to get by. We haven't made a profit yet in almost 3 years. And it's not because the people in Inglewood aren't great patrons.
There's just not enough of them.
There's just not enough of them. And so as long as Inglewood fights against density, they will never have a truly fully formed economy. And they, you'll hear people, I hear people complain all the time. Oh, we don't have a sports bar. Oh, we don't have this. We don't have that. We don't have this. And it's like, yeah, we could have all of these things, but we need more people. 34,000 people is a small community. People think that this town is so packed. It is not. It is empty. And I was looking over the numbers of our demographics. There are more people 65 and over than there are 35 to,
Well,
65.
and it's
Families go south, families go.
And not to skew into the other groups, because I think there's the preserve group and the others, but not to say anything bad about 65 and over people who have a nice house and don't want anything to change and want it to be 1955, but they're not a young family. They're not looking to go anywhere. And I
Or they're
think
not spending much.
they're not spending much. They're not the ones who are going out
Right.
to the bars and restaurants. And I think that we as a city obviously need to listen to residents and their concerns, but the problem we're trying to solve is going directly against their wills and wishes for the city. And at some point, the rubber hits the road of what does the city look like? You don't want to just wait until there's
Here's the thing, is like doing nothing. The bad things that they don't want to happen are gonna happen. And it's gonna look just like everything coming down Broadway.
Mhm.
And so let's define what we want it to look like and be proactive about it. Because it's gonna happen. And I think there's lots of urban centers around the country that have some neighborhoods that are great examples. And there's lots of neighborhoods that we can find around Denver that are terrible examples of what we don't want. And so there's visuals out there to show, the
And that's,
outcomes.
that goes to the, so, and I reworked this. So develop a community education campaign that higher density for affordable housing can work and builds upon Inglewood's characteristics. Because it's a little subtle, but builds upon means we're making progress. We're making different choices. Is that a recommendation? Do we-
I like it, yeah. I mean, it goes into the strategic vision, right? We need diversity in this community. And that means the diversity age-wise, income-wise, race-wise, all of these things. We need diversity.
I'll give you a little glimmer of hope, just a small one. We met yesterday with the senior leadership at Wellspring Church, which is on Broadway. And I was asking them kind of like their longer-term ambitions. So I asked the senior pastor, Billy, tell me what it is 10 years from now. I'm not going to share what he shared because it involves what they want to do in terms of what they want to build and plan. But it was really interesting because we started talking about, everybody perceives, big churches, they have parking issues. So I said, where are people parking? Oh, they're parking in the neighborhoods, parking a lot. So that's interesting. So he said, that led him to say, and it's really interesting that our church is getting younger. He said, we're seeing growth in people who are in their 20s and 30s. He said, and beyond that, a lot of them are here. They're walking to church on Sunday. So I do think the demographic is starting to swing a little bit.
I mean, I looked at the numbers on like Inglewood's gotten older and whiter. It's.
That's not quite true. We have a huge number of millennials in this town. And
Well, how do you attract that millennial or that young family with these build recommendations? And again, I think it's all levels of AMI, of why is somebody picking to live here? Good location in the city, cool character, good schools, but you don't want to exclude, let's just say, a young, not income restricted family who could be a great customer.
Oh, no,
For-
no, no.
And limit just the affordable piece, because there is a tie in there of like, more people are great, but you do want the full
I want the
income
full
spectrum.
The full spectrum.
And how do you bring the full spectrum without, doing things that, okay, so wait a second, I'm a young family, but I make enough money that like, can't live in any of these restricted units and all the limited supply of the unrestricted market rate units, I can't find one of those either.
How
So-
many of young families are gonna wanna live in units that small though? If they
Yeah,
have
but
children?
I think like a 1,000 to 1,500 foot unit that is a 2 or 3 bedroom works for a lot of families and is a great
Especially if you
starter.
live in a walkable, well.
Exactly.
Again, looking over the horizon, let's say that we're 5 years from now, and there's new regs around it. The way I would look at it is, we're not prohibiting that person coming in and either buying or redeveloping a market rate house, because that's what they can afford. They have a growing family, they can afford to do that, go to town. I think what we're trying to do is characterize the people who, and incentivize the people who want to come in and do what we're talking about here in terms of that affordability component. So if your project is affordable, then you could do this. And that's where it opens up that additional.
It's not restricting the duplexes. It's
Right.
not restricting.
Yeah, people can still do that.
They can still build like $2 million duplexes.
That's.
Yeah. They definitely can.
I have a question. If I was this lovelorn widower in my single-family home, soon to be in a movie, if I was approached by someone wanting to buy a land trust, or forget that, if someone was just like, hey, I want to buy a lot of your land. And let's say I live alone in this $600,000, 2,000 square foot home. I don't know, I don't buy it. And I sold the back or the front of my lot, and there was a $300,000, $400,000
1,000 foot house.
unit put in there, right? How would that affect the value of my property then at that point? It would
Well,
actually.
you get the money from the sale.
I would take the money from the sale, of course. So if I get that for like, I don't know, 100 grand, like 50 grand, like what would I get for of that parcel?
I'd say 100 to 200.
Okay, I get that, which then would deduct the value of my home, right? Which then has already created more affordability.
Your 600 grand is now 450.
Right.
Agreed. Yes, and I think that my concern, again, back on the true affordable, and I heard what you said about the young family market rate, is I think that we're working on supply of how do we bring, let's just say 500 grand and under supply to the market, right? All the other supply, scrapes, duplexes, are $1 million and up. But what about that gap for, again, me, like let's just say I have a 150 grand job. Like I can't afford $1 million house,
But you make too
but
much.
but I make too much for the under 500. Like
family.
how do you bring a 500 grand to $1 million supply online? And really the way you do it isn't by having a bigger house. It's by having that 1,500 foot or 2,000 foot
Well, that's not an
unit
option when you
that's
have like
not
6
being,
adults.
that's not being
One
built.
adult.
But I mean, what I'm saying is like, if we start splitting these units or these lots, and we start turning $600,000 homes into $400,000 homes, those are still old, single-family homes. You've just created affordability where there wasn't one before necessarily.
It's the whole model of a scattered site, single family land trust.
And that's already what we have up here, right?
Yes,
That's-
again,
I guess for me, I've been focusing so much on what the new unit would be cost-wise.
No, you're
that I-
getting two,
That I wasn't thinking about
you're making
the
that-
value of the existing homes.
so again, I'm not intending to limit your discussion or your debate, but I think this is all encompassing. For your purposes, both tonight and maybe for the larger group, because then what the council's gonna do is they're gonna get somebody in here. Because I don't have on our staff the ability for people to really drill down into this housing stuff at the degree we need. They're gonna get somebody in here to help them understand what those choices mean and what the pros and cons are. And then they'll base their policy based on
Well,
that.
that first recommendation, again, I like that first sentence, allow additional small lot development capacity, allow sales on the lots. My concern is the tied to the affordability requirement, and I know we're rehashing our conversation from before, because I think it limits that every one of these new lots that comes on, if it's just for somebody at 500 grand and under, it's not solving that full gap, and you still have this major gap in between of, I'm a developer, it's really hard for me to go buy a lot and build a duplex for the cost of what the lots are and have a side be under $1 million. No, I understand it.
But this could be 120 AMI, that gets you close to that $150,000 person.
So that's a different conversation if you're at a 120% AMI versus if you're putting in here an 80% AMI. And maybe
But that's all to be determined.
But
And so this can be flexible.
what I think Englewood needs is again, strictly affordable units below a certain threshold. But I think it needs a path to 500 grand to $1 million units that are the small families that come to the schools, that shop at the restaurants, that really are priced out of maybe Denver, but can afford here, but aren't necessarily restricted from their income standpoint.
Yeah, my fear, and I think a lot of this is shared, is the fear of corporate ownership of these things.
Sure.
Yeah, because the scale of doing that, I mean, you get a large company with a modular factory to just start dropping 80, I mean, I didn't say anything, I'm gonna go start a business.
And not to like jump ahead, like, that's where my head's at.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if I could go and take lots and put down 4, you can pay the price for the lot, and you can have units that can be rented and more naturally affordable just from what they are.
I think creating that niche, though, is primed to be exploited, and that's why I think the affordability piece
Is needed.
it's gonna need it to sell it, like, you know, as a policy. But also, otherwise, it's like opening a strip mine, that's, you know, for housing in Inglewood.
Save your argument, Hugo, for the larger group. It's worth you around.
No, I don't know the silver bullet or solution for how to like hit all the gaps.
Right.
But and I understand the need and the tie-in, but maybe it is 120% AMI restriction that provides a wide net for what could happen there. That provides an ability for a much more diverse family where, again, I think a big piece of this is creating those low AMI units and providing that supply. But I don't want to create a policy that is either like, okay, we have really cheap homes, or people are scraping and building really expensive homes, and we're losing what I think is a really important middle, especially when you're trying to target young families and demographics that I think the church, the restaurant, the bar want to see.
What's missing? Got 4 consensus reached recommendations at this point.
I think we may have touched on it, but I do think larger builds are important. Like we can
Oh, in
talk
addition to
about-
ADUs.
Yeah.
Like apartments and
Yeah.
What's missing in the city is you either have, and we saw this in the housing matrix, of you obviously have a bunch of single families and duplexes. You have a bunch of then 200 unit projects.
Mhm.
And there's very little, especially in the last 10 or 20 years, that are these smaller 3-story, 4-story, 20 to 40 unit type of buildings.
like row, you mean like the row houses in town?
No, I'm talking more like a smaller apartment building. Could be a
Like mini
townhome,
apartments.
could be
Oh.
different things, but
8 units.
yeah.
16 units even.
Right.
You don't see any of those.
Yeah, and when we looked at the gap, it's in one of our pieces, you could see like there's a glaring gap of, there's a bunch of supply of houses and duplexes or 1 to 4s. There's a bunch of supply then that's big buildings and developments. And how do you create some incentive for people to build stuff that is a apartment or condo?
That is squarely missing middle.
Yeah. And I mean, I saw like, I remember one of them, you know, a lot of examples were like kind of horseshoe units, right?
Courtyard units.
Yeah.
And stuff. I mean,
They exist in the city, and they exist all across Denver. There's been very little new ones built in the last couple generations.
So this is an interesting piece here. So did I capture foster more small scale apartments? I put condos because maybe someday that'll be
Yeah.
figured out.
Yeah.
16 units. This is an interesting one because this was actually in code next for a while, until it got to council. And the council had to go through the political exercise that councils have to go through. And they heard from the community.
And the community does not.
And the community said, at least now, there's not going to be this kind. So the compromise was the cottage stuff and the corner lots and the infill that way.
So that was for R1.
Yeah. Yeah,
How do
so,
we make it easy for R2? You know, we're not seeing those either. Where it's allowed but used by right.
should we say that?
I mean, I think
R2
so.
plus,
Yeah.
make it easier.
Yeah. Because, like, on a normal sized lot in Inglewood, these are big lots. Could we do an 8-unit?
Yeah.
They gave us an example, I think, on a, like, kind of an area where.
The problem is we don't have a lot of large lots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, you might need to assemble 2 lots or something, but
That's
it
what-
goes back to the same concept of let's just say the land price per unit, right? And right now, there's a real issue when your average land price is $400,000 or $500,000, and you can only build 2. Your land price per unit is so high that you have to build a stupid big house. You're not building anything affordable.
If you took 2 lots and did a 16-unit apartment complex,
Then you're at, let's just say 400 and 400 or 800,000 or $1 million, and you're building 16 units, you're only at 75,000 or 80,000 a land unit. And yes, that would be much more feasible than looking at something that's 250 or 200 a land unit, or even, again, us talking about the 4s where you're getting down to 100. So yes, I think that the ability for somebody to create something that could have more density will be a more naturally affordable project. Because you're not going to be able to build, 16 3,000-foot units, on 2 lots. They're going to be 1,000 feet each.
Amber, what do you think about this discussion?
Even if we have the space, I think anything to make it diverse, like, we don't want all of something. We want single family, we want apartments, we want duplex, we want anything to keep it diverse.
The full
The
thing.
number 2 recommendation is allowing more building, increase supply across
Yeah.
the board.
Yeah, I
Whatever
mean,
we can do to diversify it.
well, but I think this would be a good one to have as a specific for the group. to
Just
have.
because it's been rehashed before and it could be.
Well, no, I think it's kind of been forgotten a little bit.
Yeah.
I think I think a lot of people are probably thinking about big apartment buildings to solve this problem. And where we could do it, some of these smaller scale things and ADUs. This, I think, might be an interesting one for the whole group to choose.
the diversity of options, like we need different,
Yeah, if we want it diverse,
Options.
we need to have some diverse options.
We good with this one?
yeah.
Like if we, and Brad, you'd spoken about this, like if, you're looking forward 5 or 10 years, like how can decisions or recommendations we made today impact what our city looks like tomorrow? And I think, wow, if we could have 100, ADUs or units that could be sold, if you could have a community land trust that takes on 100 properties and turns them into 2 units each that are, more affordable. If you could get a couple of affordable development projects built that are larger, and if you incentivize, 10, 8 to 16 unit projects, like you quickly come up with, 500 to 1,000 units of a more affordable, diverse supply that don't exist today, that I think make a real impact in our city. And I think you need it all. There isn't a silver bullet of let's build, a massive affordable housing project. I have something that is really out of left field because I haven't mentioned or talked to it about it. Nancy, you heard it. I think you heard it when I pitched it in the interview. And this isn't I'm skewing away from maybe long-term housing and more into short-term transitional housing. I think that the city has an issue with obviously an unhoused population and where do they go and live and how do the shelters work and how could you create some type of zoning or code that would allow a different type of concept. I have images and pictures of this, but the concept is actually taking, let's just say a vacant box or a vacant industrial building, and you allow more or less infrastructure to be put in. So let's just say you have a vacant 10,000 foot retail building And you do a TI project that runs water and electric and sewer, and then you click in 50 200-foot little units. Almost think about it like a hotel room into that building. You could have community space, but a zoning or a code that would allow for you to have density for a particular use in a part of the city. This is definitely something that people don't necessarily want to live next to. That could provide a large quantity of units or supply that could help out in a time of crisis or need. Whether that's the fentanyl meth epidemic or the need for shelter space in units, which are limited. And actually allowing there to be this kind of hybrid zoning model. It's kind of something similar to like maybe what Denver is doing and housing 1,000 people. If you think about it, like giving everyone a hotel room is kind of like a square peg in a round hole. Like that hotel room doesn't have the oversight or the wraparound services or the things that are needed that you could put into a building or a warehouse. It would be interesting to show you what this diagram or model looks like. But it's this concept of housing people in what would maybe not traditionally be a standard housing envelope, but that the unit that they could have privacy, could have their own bathroom, could have their own temperature HVAC control that could protect against fire, life safety, and have those types of firewalls, could protect about somebody smoking meth in a unit and not like making it so you have to clear out a whole building and do a remediation. Anyway, that was just something that's, again, more out of left
Would
field,
that fall
maybe
in-
not long-term housing, like
Transition.
a transitional housing concept that I think is important, and that, you know, think about how many families are on a wait list to get a unit with innovative housing, and where do they live today? And they're in an extended stay or their car, and how do you create something that's like, yeah, you maybe don't want to live in this place for forever, but how do you have a zoning or an inclusion that can allow for something that's maybe a little bit out of the box, in the box?
We have some experience with that. Bridge House, which is going in down at Windermere. They went to Planning Zoning Commission to get a conditional use because it's in the industrial district, but they're converting an old, what was it? I don't even remember what it was, but it's an industrial building. And they're gonna have 75 folks in there that are immediately off the streets. And it does have wraparound services, and they're under construction right now.
And they'll have their own rooms within?
No, it's more dormitory style
Okay.
for them, because they're trying to get a lot of people through their services. And so their average stay is around 6 months for people. So it really is that kind of transition. And
No, I think that's awesome. That's
but
exactly
what you're saying is more of maybe a little bit more self-directed, self-contained.
Yeah, so
areas that
when you
we-
talk about the modules, so, I mean, I know these guys who are building these modules more for a hotel use, but have a greater good concept that, you know, the modules, they can build 4 per day. To go and drop 100 into a facility, you could literally build them in 30 days. You stitch them each in an hour. It takes no time to put them in. And how much easier is it to build or erect a warehouse and do a TI project versus get a 100-unit apartment building out of the ground? And, you know, Warren's Village has got a new big building. They're building Urban Peak. And I mean, they're amazing facilities, but they are like ungodly expensive, and they've taken them a decade to build. So how do you have a path that the next one they build could be potentially in our city and be done faster and less expensively with a lot of still the same benefits and wraparound services and care that doesn't fit in any zoning or code today?
Right, and as I said, Bridge House had to go through a conditional use process.
Sure.
So
And that makes sense.
Do we know how the tiny homes that Denver's doing off Santa Fe are faring?
I'm assuming they're all full.
Yeah, I saw a story, I didn't read it, last week. Denver Post had a story on how it's going over there. I don't know.
There's a bunch over there.
But I'm just curious.
Yeah,
If
I'm
it's
curious.
successful, like, and I don't know what the cost was for each unit.
It's a lot.
And the
It's more than it
upkeep.
should be.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think they put it on
CDOT.
CDOT square.
Oh, that's
because it's right off the highway, it's right on the other side of the fence.
So I have another side question. Is this property the only property the city of Inglewood currently owns at the moment that could have potential? I thought there were other properties.
There are a
that we
few,
learned about.
there's a few here and there. You know,
We did a review of some of them and they're
but
very,
They were
we
very
don't own a
conflicting.
lot of land that is just ready for a lot of people. Small lots, you know, the fire station up on Tejon, the building just on the other side of the.
So do they,
police station.
are they being used, like what is happening? with-
Some of them are being used, some of them are being leased out.
I'm going back and I saw it just in, rehash the materials before this, or that you guys had for the last meeting, of all the land that the city owns, that is like your challenging parcels around Broken T, or that's part of Sheridan. I mean, should there be a build recommendation that helps get those as a potential affordable supply, or is
Is there
it?
even
or
enough land?
It's, and just from the look on your face,
Yeah,
it's
like,
just
is it
that,
even enough?
they're really, these
Like,
is
we
gonna
don't
be a
know.
real challenge.
They're not super viable.
Right, I
They're
remember
not
that.
big, they're not big enough to really contain a lot of.
yeah, I think it's.
Well, and then there's also like water issues too, right? Like one of them's like right in the middle of a flood zone and,
Oh, that was the one over by the high school.
yeah.
There's water issues, there's
One's
like
rated
brown,
well,
brown.
the big-
brown
the
site,
biggest one-
yeah, it's like,
The biggest ones are in Sheridan,
they're not even in.
And they're not
so
even-
we'd have to cooperate with Sheridan on it.
So is it interesting that you brought up housing for the unhoused population, because it says options for all residents and never in this entire, 8 months, we even discussed
Like transitional housing.
transitional housing.
Well,
I remember, unless I missed that meeting, I could have missed
Well,
that.
when we talk about low-income housing tax credits, that can include permanent supportive housing, which is 30% AMI and below.
So is
That's
another
not
group gonna
transitional
be-
housing either.
oh, is another group
I
gonna
don't
be-
think, I think that the issue we have, and I remember just talking to someone about it, is that we are not necessarily here to solve something for transitional.
Okay.
But it's on the spectrum of the affordability that we're trying to at least
Yeah.
give council some things to think about. So do you want to include something around the transitional statement?
I don't know, I think if that supply existed, I think that's meaningful supply for the community that can be utilized. That, your issues, this bridge house concept sounds great.
And I think that might be, I could see a council member or two or more or whatever saying, we're addressing that. We're addressing that through this specific project, and that's a regional challenge. What can we do to encourage our neighbors to do something equally significant? Because I would say a 60 to 75 bed transitional facility in this community is major.
Yeah.
Big deal. So,
I think if every community worked to increase not just affordable housing, but to increase housing, period. This housing crisis is what's leading to the homeless crisis.
Well, there's that. There's also, the substance misuse and things that require supportive services that cannot be provided until housing is
there, yeah.
No,
Housing
and
first.
I like the transitional housing concept that is beds that provide some form of privacy. If you talk to Warren's Village or Urban Peak, I mean, they have issues of people who want to come into those places and they want space to feel safe, and that a lot of people aren't going into a communal concept or want to stay there because they don't want to share a bathroom. They don't feel like they have the privacy. And so
Or
giving,
There's couples or kids
or
pets.
a dog,
or,
yeah, exactly. And so creating a facility that can both help provide a bed, but privacy, as well as the wraparound services that tie to it.
So where are we on this as a
I
recommendation?
mean, maybe the recommendation could be to acknowledge the full spectrum of housing, from congregate shelter to non-congregate shelter to PSH, to all the way up the spectrum to include market rate. I don't know if the recommendation, that's really generic, but to acknowledge that all of this
This whole spectrum needs to be addressed.
Why don't we say
But
acknowledge that
specifically-
the spectrum includes transitional housing?
Have a-
And the need for it in our community.
Yeah, it's really easy for every city, especially smaller municipalities like this, to say, that's Denver's problem.
Yeah, or to just blame visible poverty on Denver or some other city.
I feel like it's so normalized, though, like it's normal. We live right by Cushing Park and we talk to everybody who's living out of their cars over there. We take them charcoal or lighter fluid to help them out when they're trying to cook their food, and
Where's
it's
this from?
just like normal. They're
These guys.
people, they're part of our community.
A lot,
We
maybe.
pet their cats, we give their cats
You have your
tuna,
pods
like
that you
it's,
put in, each
Well,
pod
it
is
shouldn't be normal.
got
and
a
it's
bed,
sad
a little
though, like when I
space,
think
and a little
about it,
bathroom.
like,
But
we
then
just
you have
wonder
social
how long
workers
until
department,
they
lockers,
move on their home, so they're
laundry.
forced
You have a
to.
place where people can.
Or how
get
long
food.
till I'm one of them?
And you have, where
Well,
they
yeah,
can get an
before you move
interview.
into that house,
Create a place
9
that
days
actually
away from
is
being on
controlled
the streets.
access.
and the only reason we got
Safe,
the house was the
And you can
landlord
drop in, this has
and
60
education, and she
ADA
found out I was a
accessible
teacher,
pods and
and so
6,400
she
feet.
made it
And
so
you
we
get
didn't
roughly
have to meet the
4,000 feet
credit
of
and
wraparound
income and all
services,
those.
so you can
Otherwise,
kind of create
we
a pod
literally would've
area
been-
that can be
In your car.
similar, you can
Yeah,
create
in
double
our van.
occupancy in them,
In the-
and then this can be adaptable.
What?
And if you think about it in a warehouse, it almost could be 2 stories
Yeah.
if you needed to.
Living at
Of-
Cushing Park.
This is
Yeah,
a
it's, we
10,000
put tons of
foot,
stuff out, we always
15,000
got
foot
food,
building.
socks, coats, clothes.
You could bring online for under $10 million
Yeah.
to house a lot of people. Yeah.
I want to do a quick time check. We got 10
Yes.
minutes until your allotted time. So you have 2 choices. We can go till then and then continue some other time. Or we can try to wrap it up, or we can continue until you want to be done this evening. So it's really up to you. That being
Well,
said.
back to what you said, or what are we missing?
Oh, well, before I check it, I just want to make sure, acknowledge that the housing spectrum includes the need for transitional housing in Englewood.
I agree.
About that. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's back to what you were directing us to earlier, of what's
Now,
missing.
what's missing? And if you can't read something, I can certainly, because you can tell I'm already wearing this. Lefties are not good
I know, I
scribes.
got so bad. Lefty, right?
I think the first one, the first recommendation, make it easy as possible for affordable housing developers to build and deliver units. Kind of ties to your multifamily projects and larger scale development, as well as other types.
We're not here to figure out funding. Like, that's
No,
another.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
So we're just, how do we build more?
I like that we have the education component on it that helps go against the opposition and people who are against anything changing. I like that we have the 8 to 16 because it's a little bit of the missing middle. I think we talked about the small lot and the cottage house and that. We debated about the affordability piece.
I think, Aaron, like, the education part, if we can win that, if we can do that, then everything else
That unlocks
becomes.
a lot of tools.
That's
Yeah.
a big-
With every tool, you can say, hey, we're going for that.
Right, like, we could come up with a million perfect ideas on, we could all walk the streets and be like, this is a place we'll build right here, we could do this, we've got the money, we've got the people, everyone's going, but if we don't have the will of the residents, we got nothing.
Yep.
So, we gotta get people on board.
Yeah.
How do we get everyone to say,
We've
yippee?
got to hire a team.
We
Good
need
luck.
everyone to be a yippee.
How do you develop YIMBYs? Totally.
There's a downside to that too, but.
What are you even saying? You?
Yippies?
Yes,
What
in
is
my
it?
backyard.
Yes, in my backyard.
As opposed to bananas.
NIMBY.
You know what a banana is?
Oh
Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone.
my
There you
gosh,
go.
isn't there like something in between both of these?
Do we want to include a recommendation that specifically provides a hub for land trust? Or, I mean, what did we have in there about, something about supporting?
The middle one at the top.
I think there was something about partnerships.
Enable ADUs to be sold, land trust, build ADUs with
Oh,
seniors.
okay.
I just said it as easy as possible for affordable housing developers. And that was kind of trying to at least appear inclusive.
I mean, could it be
one key point about a land trust model is that investments made today are gonna last for generation. So the idea of perpetuity, the idea of long-term affordability. Which is a great selling point also for making these investments, that it's not just a subsidy for one person today.
So encourage land trusts for longevity.
Yeah, and I'm thinking maybe that adds in some detail on one of these, or if we have a whole nother recommendation.
Is it?
Well, again, the closest one is
Yeah.
for, we could say for all affordable housing developers, but if
Yeah.
you wanted to carve that, I'll add that in. All types.
But even commercial developers on a land trust is good, right?
Well, it can be. I mean, the land trust is able to preserve and protect and dictate the use of that land. So it could be for a Boys and Girls Club. It could be for a charter school. You know, there's lots of aside from housing. And maybe now we're getting outside. I'm like, a healthy community includes affordable housing, but also all of these other things. Access to healthcare, access to food. But that's not what we're here to talk about tonight, right? Agreed.
On the middle bottom one,
This one,
yeah, no, not that one, that one.
this one.
Yeah, is there more detail that we want to add to that? Like, I feel like it's very generic. I think that it's good, but like how?
I also think, along with the bottom one on the right page, yes, more of everything, but how do we especially incentivize those missing pieces? You know, the 8 to 16 units, the 500 to $1 million price point, you know, the 1,500 square foot single family homes. Like, is there another side to
You
that?
wanna
Like,
add
yes,
those?
more of everything, but how do we specifically
You want to
encourage
add
those?
those three to this one? As examples?
But you write across the board, which, you know,
That's good. I mean, we
Which I
still
think-
want that.
Yeah.
So maybe it's another recommendation, or maybe one tied, or more detail on the foster more small scale apartment
Do you just
complexes.
want to add the other two that you had?
Yeah,
Which was
so
500 to.
500 to a miss, yeah. Attainable, maybe we say, or
500
family
to
attainable type.
what's your high end?
A million, not even $1 million. I think that's, it just doesn't sound.
800?
5 to 8. 5 to 8.
sure.
And then, 15 to 2,000 square foot single family home, or 15 to 2,000 square foot family units or something.
How much money do you have to make to be able to buy an $800,000 house? I'm just curious. Do y'all
To
know?
finance a 500?
No, 800.
800?
Like, how much does it?
Like, what does your income need to be?
Yeah,
It depends. The interest rates have come way down now.
Yeah, the interest rates dropped to half, but then you also, like, are you putting down 20%
I don't know
or?
anybody
I think
who's
when we
putting
had
down
the, I think when we had the
Yeah, are you
meeting,
doing
the
PMI,
interest rates were at the peak, where it was like, if you evaluate what this is at a 7.5% interest rate, today you get an interest rate that's closer to 6.
Yeah, but here's what's
So-
gonna happen. Prices of all these units are gonna go up because,
Now there's more demand and people are out shopping again.
well, I mean, the market's gonna push it to where it can go. So if the average person can spend X amount a month on their mortgage, the interest rate is baked
Very
into it.
back of the napkin, if you have $1 million house and you have a 200 grand that you need to put into the house and you go get an 800 grand loan, an 800 grand loan at 6% is 48 grand a year plus principal amortization. You're probably at like 60 to probably at 5 to 6 grand a month.
But you don't think the value of the house is gonna go up?
That's for $1 million house.
To meet the drop in the interest rate?
I don't think so yet. I don't know.
How long until, do you think?
I actually would say that you could make a case that house prices right now, as scary as the comment is it could be bottomed out right now. And that you kind of were up here, and you kind of came down a little bit, and now you're shooting back
I
up.
think they're gonna go up.
Yeah, I agree too.
Just terrifying.
Yeah.
Like, so people who are making that kind of money are also struggling. People are making $260,000. buying 800, there's not that many $800,000.
No, it's broken. It's broken.
Yeah,
This is all broken.
yeah.
On that note.
That's a great ending.
On a high note. Wonderful.
Are there any other things or edits or the other, I mean, you all will obviously think of some things between now
I'm
and
just
then.
glad y'all
The next
added
time the group
500.
meets, so this is not intended to be limited by any means. So.
I mean, with the group meeting in a couple weeks, I think it'd be interesting to get the couple people who are part of our group's thoughts or recommendations to layer in on this.
So what we're gonna do is what we'll do is type these up verbatim, make sure that we get them to them and ask them to reflect on these and add any edits or any additional ones that they wanna have. And then we could probably send it out to everybody.
I think that what would be great is if they're able to, let's just say, review and provide some feedback in a week. And then we, I guess, can all, maybe on an email chain, are we allowed to do that?
No, because we can't talk to each other more than
Notice.
two.
So at this point, what I would say is, we're gonna ask those two folks to do something individual.
But really,
Their
what the
comments back.
conversation wouldn't be about adding additional recommendations. It would be about whether we need to meet again for a few minutes, right?
So your next all
Is the
committee meeting is
third.
October 3rd, so really you have next week and a couple of days following week. If you wanted to meet again.
It's up to you, what you want to do. But at a minimum, what we're going to do is send this to them and ask them to reflect on it, at least individually.
And they'll
I
also
get-
have a link to the
To record.
to the meeting so they can hear all of your
Can we
discussion.
plan on taking a poll in a week of just, do we want to meet again?
Oh, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
After the all big meeting?
Well, I think if we can see our recommendations, Diane and Samantha could layer in there, so we kind of have our talking points, and then you could send us that summary and whether you think we can need to meet again and when we could.
Yeah. Once everybody has everything, we can ask that.
Yeah,
Do
exactly.
you want to do another meeting
Yeah.
prior to the next
Yeah, that's
large group meeting? We can certainly do that. So I can send this to them tomorrow, to the other two. I can do that.
No, I think it's great, and I think just letting them know that it would be good for them to timely provide feedback so that we can discuss whether we should meet again. If we have comments to the recommendations that we come up with, are we able to share them to you?
Yeah, send it to both Brad and me, please.
But we really can't share them to
Right.
each other if we're not in this forum, including as part of an email chain.
Well, and that's what we would want to do. If I go home and I'm like, oh my God, I just thought of these three
Yeah.
extra things that I want to, get a recommendation about, I would say, hey, let's meet again before the next meeting.
Yeah.
I have other ideas. Yeah. I think it's good. Okay.
Probably knock it out in an hour. Okay, we'll go about it that way.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Cool.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
The only other piece we do need to, at some point, figure out is who's going to present the build
Oh, that's right.
at the October 3rd
I-
meeting.
This can be
Not it.
I was just ready for Joe to write this screenplay.
That's my part. I think it'd be a good idea if we just did a staged reading, so.
Yeah.
Well, this is great.